Hi everyone.
G'day.
And welcome to Parkside Live. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad to have you join us for this conversation around the practice of power. And as we chat, if you want to leave us a comment, or if you've got any questions, or you just want to connect in any way, leave me a comment here, or DM us, or on YouTube, leave a message. We'll get back to you as soon as we can.
Yes. Yeah. So, by way of introduction, we have an emergency light, and it sits about this tall, and it's a rechargeable light. So I actually had a reminder on my calendar to say, hey, you need to recharge the emergency light in case of
emergency.
Yeah, exactly. And we had a blackout. Everything went black. It was a dark night, and so there wasn't much ambient light outside. And so I went to get the emergency light, prepared for just such a situation. But when we got there, we found that for some reason the power in our emergency light was not working. And so when we were confronted with an electrical power outage, we were quite literally powerless to do anything about it. And we our kids were quite young at that stage, and they were a little bit nervous, and having a light there would have helped to calm them down. But we just kind of had to make the best. We didn't really have any power. And as we move through our lives, there are situations where we may feel very powerful. There are other situations that we may be confronted with that we feel very powerless. And as you're watching this, you may be able to recall a time in your life when you felt you had no power. It may be something as simple as electrical power going out. It may be personal power. It may be a lack of ability to influence a culture, whatever that is, because power is simply the ability to do something. And so as we're going to explore the practice of power, what that looks like in the world today, and what that looks like for us. As we talk about this, have you ever had a moment that you can share that you felt powerless?
Yep. One time, I don't know, I'm laughing because it was quite terrible, but I guess I can laugh about it now because it was a while ago and it was dealt with. But I always sort of prided myself on, if anyone attacked me, I'd be able to get out of that situation. But I was in a situation where someone attacked me, and I did feel powerless because I could not get out of their grip. Someone had to come and save me.
Wow. So that was a situation of physical power.
Yeah,
right. How did that feel at that time?
It was very, very scary. Because I thought I'd previously, but I think you never really think it's going to happen to you, and then someone unexpected stopped me from going where I wanted to, and someone had to come and actually physically harm that person in order to
free you.
So exert their power over that person which they had to enable me to be free because I had no power.
That's outrageous.
It was pretty awful.
And as you watch this, you may be able to relate to situations like Renata's. You may be a bit like me, where as you move through your life, really situations where I've been genuinely powerless have been pretty few and far between. And even when they have arisen, we've been able to navigate. I remember we were walking through the streets of a city in South Africa, in Johannesburg, and a friend of mine, we were just trying to grab a drink from a shop, and we walked down a very wide street, and we saw a shop in the distance, what we thought was a shop, and so we started walking, and as we started walking, two what looked to be men from a distance stood out in the middle of the street, like right in the middle, and we felt like they were staring at us. It was hard to work out, but because I hadn't had many experiences like that, I thought, we'll be right, we'll keep going. There's two of them, there's two of us. And then as we walked closer, another 5 or 6 men joined the group, and we started to slow a little bit more, but still kept walking. And then after that, there was another probably 6 to 10 people, and they all just stood in the road staring at us. I have no idea what they wanted, but for me, that was a situation. I was like, if we keep going, we're going to be powerless to control it. And so we turned around and went, we actually avoided it. And so sometimes you can, but sometimes,
Yeah.
like your situation,
Yeah.
you couldn't avoid it. Like, it was just imposed upon you. And so we're going to explore, actually draw some inspiration from Scripture about the practice of power. And so we're going to read from the Gospel of Luke, starting at chapter 2 here. And it just simply says this. At that time, the Roman Emperor, Augustus, decreed that a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This was the first census taken when Quirinius was the governor of Caesar. All people returned to their own ancestral towns to register for this census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He travelled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, his fiancée, who was now obviously pregnant. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her first child, a son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger because there was no lodging available for them. And so it's a short story, and some of you may have heard that before. Some of you may have seen the displays in shopping centres where we walk past and we see this going on. And you may be thinking, what's this got to do with the practice of power? As we read through this, what observations come out to you?
That there was no room for them anywhere. Like, they had to leave their hometown and go to a new town while she was obviously pregnant, so it would have been a hard journey. And then they had nowhere for them to stay once they got there.
Yeah. Now, you and I, we might describe that as being homeless.
Yeah.
Now, I've had to sleep in my car. I remember a particular wedding. I slept in a car, but that was overnight, and I knew it was one night, and then I'd go back here. I haven't had an experience of being homeless.
Well, they were also told to leave somewhere.
Yeah. But there's a level, I think, of powerlessness that comes with being homeless.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get out of being homeless, particularly where we live, you have to give your address, and the government will support you. But if you don't have a home, you can't give an address, then you can't get support.
Yeah.
And so at a very personal level, they were homeless.
Yep.
And it's interesting, on a social level too, they had become disempowered.
Yeah.
Where we live right now, there is a free birth movement going on, where people make a choice not to have trained medical staff present. Now, I don't understand it, but they make a choice. Yeah. This young person, who we think that Mary was probably about 15 at the time, she was not part of the free birth movement. No. There just simply wasn't any social connections. Yeah. We know from this story that this was a person who had relationships, who had an auntie who she went to, and yet in the time of her greatest need, here, her auntie was not there.
No.
And then when we reflect on that, we can think about times in our lives where we have felt like we want physical proximity to someone else, where we want emotional connection to someone else in times where things are hard, because when we have that proximity, we feel more courageous, we feel more able to deal with situations. And yet we see here that Mary in this story is disempowered. She, as you've been, and we'll get to this in a sec, she was forced to move. And I think it is not good for humanity to be alone.
No.
We are better together.
Yeah.
And that doesn't matter what you believe. I think for most of us, we are better together. Yeah. And then we look up here, and there's a particular description here about the status of Joseph's relationship to Mary. Now, this particular version of the Bible says it very nicely, fiancé. Depends where you're from, you might think, oh, that's nice. Other versions will say a word betrothed or promised. In the culture of the day, they were not married.
No.
And so where they were from, that was actually a societal norm that was punishable by death.
Yeah.
Being pregnant outside of the institution of marriage in that time. And so this couple then were also culturally disempowered. They were pushed to the margins. The institutions that should have been there to serve and help them, they were pushed to the margins. I don't know if you have ever felt pushed to the margins.
Probably not in a big way where I can't go somewhere or do something because of how people see me. I maybe felt that myself, like, you know, maybe not belonging somewhere or feeling because, you know, maybe I have different beliefs or values to other people that I'm not welcome somewhere, but not really where it's going to affect me like it would have affected them.
Yeah, and as you go through life, you may have experienced a bit more like me, that life is actually more about pushing towards the centre, not necessarily the spotlight, but I want to be the one who can make the choices. I want to be the one making the decisions. I want to be in the action seat. And yet when you are pushed to the edges, that can be very disenchanting. Culturally, it's a challenge. And as you're watching this, you may recognise a time when you've been a part of an institution that has pushed you to the margins, where you have been disempowered by an organisation, perhaps even an organisation like the church that has been put there to serve you, and it has failed you. And then there's just a last point here. So at a personal level, at a social level, at an institutional level, they've been disempowered. But then we come up here, and the first line that we just read here, in the time of the emperor, other versions will say Caesar Augustus. Now, real person, real moment in history. And what do we know about the Romans at this point in time?
Well, they were kind of conquering different lands, like taking over different places. So they were like explorers, you know, going into different parts, but taking over like by force. And trying to make everything Rome.
Exactly. And they're within the bounds of what they had conquered. There was this idea of Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, which basically meant if you did what you were told, you wouldn't be killed. That was the peace that you had. And the area of Judea for the 200 odd years before this had uprisings and riots that had been just literally stomped out by the Roman army. When Mary and Joseph heard the news that they had to leave their hometown, it would have been delivered by a messenger, probably accompanied by an armed guard. When they travelled the roads, there would have been Romans walking the roads, and even had to clear the path as a Roman messenger came through. And so all around them there would have been signs. When they arrived at Jerusalem, there would have been someone sitting there registering them, and they would have been accompanied by guards. The presence of physical and military power was huge in their lives. I don't know if you've ever lived under military occupation.
No.
Perhaps if you're watching this, you may have never experienced that level of disempowerment.
No. I mean, I remember like my dad telling stories though of being moved out of where they lived at gunpoint during the Second World War. And having soldiers come and go, you cannot live here anymore. And pushing them out. But I've not experienced it. But I've heard first-hand stories, and it's scary.
And so we see now there's several levels here of disempowerment, where this young couple, personally homeless, socially disconnected, institutionally actually oppressed, and then they're living in under military occupation. And as you think about how power plays out in your life, I wonder what level of disempowerment you may have experienced. Perhaps none. Perhaps you can identify with one of these levels here. As we look around in the world today, the practice of power seems to go in one of two directions. They're not the only ones, but we see people making use of power for their own benefit. We see publicly elected governments making decisions that benefit them. In our country where we live, we see politicians who will work in a particular sector. For example, they might work in the mining sector,
Yeah.
and then they leave government, and then a few years later they appear working as a lobbyist. So they will argue on behalf of that industry back towards the government. They've used their position for their own gain. We've just seen a case recently where a world leader was elected, released a digital currency, made policy decisions that benefited that digital currency, and then made a whole heap of money.
Yeah.
And perhaps where you are in your world, you can see people who have power using it for their own means, using it to benefit themselves, particularly elected people who have been elected to serve, using that power for their own means. And perhaps you may have experienced that in workplaces where people are using their power to threaten and intimidate others, to make people do what they would not ordinarily do because of this power. I think the other side of that is that we live in an age where people are increasingly relinquishing their power.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've...
Well, I mean, I've just experienced people who are just going, I don't want to make the decisions. I don't want to make a choice. And so relinquishing their power, either then to always blame someone else for something that's happening, instead of realising that they can have, agency and a choice, but going, well, it's all too hard. I want someone else to do it. And then I can always blame someone else and not take responsibility for my own actions or my own life.
Yeah. And so then, as we move through life as human beings, and you may be exploring what it means to be a human being in connection with your Creator, what does the practice of power look like? And I think we have a picture right here, because the claim here is that the Creator of the universe stepped into humanity. And we see, just even in this story here, that the Creator of the universe did not step in as a military power.
No.
He did not come to conquer and to dominate.
No.
The Creator of the universe did not step in as an institutional power. Matter of fact, from birth was kind of on the fringes of that.
Yeah.
He did not step into a socially well-connected environment. He stepped in, he was born homeless.
Yeah.
And shortly after actually had to leave and flee.
Yeah.
What does that look like for us? Well, I want to talk about a word that we don't use too often, this idea of meekness. And later on, this same baby grew up to be someone who spoke these words, blessed are the meek. What does meekness mean to you?
When I first hear it, I think maybe gentle, or I know that weakness kind of can be evoked when you hear that word.
Yeah, I think it's very true, hey? That when we talk about meek, we're talking about gentleness and mildness. We're talking about, and I'll use this phrase, strength submitted.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I think there is this idea that meekness is a lack of strength.
Yeah, well, that's what I was saying. Like,
Yeah,
I think,
you did.
some people hear it, and that's why I said it. Like, you can think weakness, oh, that person is very meek, like they're timid, and that when it's not really what it is at all.
Yeah. Now, where we live, we've got in our town, we've got a Wheels Festival organised by other people, and so a lot of people in our town are into cars, have put a lot of time and effort into buying, into rebuilding cars, into tuning up and doing special things with the engines. And we have this festival where all these cars just drive in, and you watch them drive in, they turn off the main road, and for a lot of them they have quite powerful engines, and you can just hear them as they're basically just rolling along the road, and the engine is gurgling, and they'll gently turn in onto the grass where they're meant to park, and there'll be someone there in the yellow vest, and they'll go here, no worries mate, bump, bump, bump. And some of these cars are quite powerful, but they just roll in gently and pull up to a stop. when they leave at the end of the day, and I've seen this happen, they'll gently roll back across the grass out onto the road, but then as they hit the road, the tyres will squeal as the wheels spin, you'll hear the engines go from this gurgle into this roar, and you see a little bit of the power that these cars, these vehicles have. And I think that's a great picture of meekness, that as they're coming in, they know they've got the power, but they're just, I'm doing what I need to do here. And then they're not, on the way in, they're not using that power to impress anyone, they're not using it to show off, but it is strength submitted to the rules of the road, strength submitted to the guidance of the parking people. And what we see here is that the way of faith in Jesus is not about saying, I have no power, I can't do anything here. It's not what Jesus said. And when you look at his life from this point, he actually steps into social connection. He creates a social connection. He actually steps into the institution that marginalised his parents. He actually welcomed the oppressors. So he didn't throw his hands up. But then when you also look at the life that we see here from this small child, he did not once use his power to benefit himself. Matter of fact, there was a particular moment where crowds came to watch and he fed them and they wanted to make him king by force because they saw, in you, we can defeat the ones who are oppressing us. And in that moment, he walked away because that's not why he came. And so, if we are seeking to follow Jesus, I want to encourage you to follow the path of strength submitted to the way of Jesus. That we believe that everyone deserves the opportunity to experience the love and the power of Jesus in their lives. Do I submit my strength, my energy, my efforts to that goal? When I parent my kids, am I doing it in a way that is submitted to the power of God? When I walk into work, am I doing it in a way where my energies are submitted to the power of God? When I'm engaged with my institutions, even with the political powers, am I doing it in a way that I'm submitted to God? And as we submit, there will be moments where that actually leads us then back into conflict. That particularly if we have been a person who has abdicated our own power, that moment when we say, I have some power, I have some choice here, in a relationship, when we say, no, I'm not doing that anymore, that's actually going to create conflict. That is not the wrong path. That is not a wrong practice of power. We just got to expect that when we make a change, there will be ripples. That when we start to stand up at work, that there may be ripples, that may be even more difficult when we start to practice the power that God has given us. Institutionally, there will be ripples when we start to lay hold of the power that God has and say, hey, I am living for the power of Jesus. And I don't have all the answers when it comes to the practice of power. But that's why we call this a journey of faith, because we give ourselves, we step into this life that Jesus empowers us to live, and we work through those decisions. Practicing power in the way that Jesus practices power will change our lives. It may lead us into more conflict. It will change the lives of our communities. And so we want to invite you, as you're watching this, that if you want to begin to practice power in the way that Jesus did, if you want to practice power in a different way than you see power being exercised in the world around you, then we invite you simply to pray a short prayer with us. And that is, Jesus, I give you my life. Give me your life. And in that moment, you will receive the power that only Jesus can give. You will receive the perspective on power that only Jesus can give. And you'll begin to move through this world in a way that expresses Jesus' love and power. And if that's what you want to do, then join us in prayer right now. Jesus, I give you my life. Give me your life. Jesus, I give you my life. Give me your life. And if you pray that prayer, we would love to support you on the next steps in your journey. Please drop us a comment or message us in our DMs. And if you're coming through Southwest Sydney, we'd love you to join us in this very room. Thanks for tuning in. God bless.